Today we've got the ultimate revenge story on a president of an HOA. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, why we don't see Uncle Mark anymore. So this was told to me by my dad over a drink recently. He'd gotten a little drunk and ended up admitting it to me, said it's been too long now and he'd paid the consequences, so there was nothing to come back on him. Only reason I'm posting this, Uncle Mark was my favorite uncle when I was a child. He always invited me around to show me his airsoft gun collection, hide-and-seek parties with my friends, and even took us to the beach. He would always come with sweets for us and acted like one of us, another child who just wanted to have fun. But then, the day I, 7 years old, was meant to be going around because we were going for a ride to this amazing place. My dad was happy and cheerful for the entire day. He was going on about how much he loved the fact his brother wanted to be in his children's life until he got a call. I was in my room packing my stuff when I heard the most blood-curdling scream from my dad. He was screaming and raging. I heard him rip open our front door and slam it back shut with enough force to make the picture next to it fall off the wall. I didn't see my dad for a long while after that, and he never told me why until we had this talk. But that shall be explained at the end. Mom had a lot of money saved up from a minor lotto win, so we were okay, and she always smiled and said, "Daddy's just away for a little while because he was looking after you and your siblings," whenever I asked where he was. Uncle Mark didn't come around either during this time, but we did see him in town a couple of times. Funnily enough, he ran away the moment my mom saw me waving at him. 9 months later, Dad came home, and I excitedly ran and hugged him. He hugged me right back with a good squeeze. We had a party to celebrate him coming home. We had party food and cake and all the usual stuff. I was just happy my dad was home though. A week or so later, Dad sat me down with the other children and explained that Uncle Mark wouldn't be coming around anymore. When asked why, he just said Uncle Mark was a bad person and that if he ever tried to talk to us, we were to ignore him and come find one of them. We all agreed because my dad always knew best after all. One day, a year or so later, 9 at this point, I'm coming out of school to wait for my parents to pick me up. My other siblings were either at secondary school or too young for school, so it was just me. I see Uncle Mark stood there with a big grin. I get nervous when he comes up to me, saying he's here to take me for a ride. I tell him I'm not supposed to talk to him, that he's a bad person like my dad said. Uncle Mark got this scary look on his face for a second, then told me it was all good and my parents had changed their mind and made to take my hand. That's when I saw my dad just appear. My dad punched Uncle Mark right in the face and little old me saw blood fly as Uncle Mark went sprawling. I didn't see much after except Uncle Mark running away with my dad chasing him. He came back after a little while, sighed, and took me in a hug. He told my mom to take me home and that he would see us later. I don't know why, but I knew there and then it would be a long time before I ever saw my dad again. And I was right. 5 years. 5 years my dad was gone. My mom eventually admitted to us that he was in prison for protecting us, and we had all guessed that he had done something to Uncle Mark. And he had. Turns out Uncle Mark liked kids. He liked them a lot. And that day I was meant to go to his house, my aunt, Uncle Mark's wife, had called my dad and told him she had found some pictures under her and Mark's bed of children, and she was scared of what to do because Mark was a big man, and it was later revealed he abused her, so she was scared to call the police on him. And my dad had gone into a rage and stormed over to his house. He had smashed in the door to find Uncle Mark screaming at my aunt as she waved the pictures around in hysterics. My dad had beaten Uncle Mark within an inch of his life, Uncle Mark screaming that he'd make him pay as the police had arrested my dad. Messed up thing was, by the time my dad had explained why he had done it, Mark managed to get the pictures, burned them, and scared his wife into saying nothing, so there was no evidence. My dad was sent down for assault, but made sure my other uncles and older cousins were around to protect us in case Mark came back. But oh no, Mark waited until my dad thought we were safe. And then, according to my dad, had come to kidnap me from the school right under their noses. Who would stop him? Parents didn't believe my dad when he explained Mark was a predator. They thought he was just excusing himself for attacking him. After all, the police hadn't found anything, and his wife said my dad was a liar, whereas my dad was the big angry guy with a few assaults under his belt already. So all they saw was my nice uncle here to pick me up. He had gotten away from my dad at the school. My dad had tripped and it gave him the chance to run. But my dad knew where he would go. Knew Uncle Mark would run home to hide and more than likely destroy any evidence he had gotten since destroying the last lot. He also knew the police would be on his tail for the attack on the school, so he didn't have long. Difference was, though, my dad had his car while Uncle Mark was on foot. So he drove over and demanded to know if my aunt was going to lie again, after what Uncle Mark had just tried to pull. Now, I don't like my aunt much after what she pulled the first time, but I think in that moment she really realized what a monster my uncle was. He was willing to do this to her nephew just for pathetic revenge for being called out as a predator. She said she wouldn't stop my dad or save Mark this time. My dad ordered her to get all the evidence she could as he waited for Mark to appear. She came back down with pictures, lots of pictures. He then told her to go, wait 1 hour, and then call the police. He was ending this. And as Uncle Mark appeared, my dad, who had been waiting behind the wall of his garden, slammed him through the door of his house, and then proceeded to beat him to death in his doorway. He apparently towards the end couldn't see the floor through the blood. My dad was arrested on murder and did so without resistance, only saying he wished they had done his job for him. But when it was revealed that Uncle Mark was indeed a predator who had attempted to kidnap me, and the fact that they had to face the fact that they had allowed a predator to run free, he was instead charged for manslaughter. His lawyer stating my father had gone into a protective rage and had only intended to render him harmless. Funnily enough, no one argued in defense of the predator for my dad getting the murder charges. He said that he didn't regret it, but that he wished he had done something else purely so that he didn't miss out on so much of my life. I told him that I was forever going to be proud of him for that and that I loved him. I was a bit shocked I wasn't told just what Uncle Mark was for so long. But my dad asked if it would have made it any better to be told as a child what he really was, or now as a man who can handle the truth. And he was right. Me as a child would not have been able to mentally handle it. I'm barely able to handle it now. I think this is one of those circumstances where, purely in the eyes of the law, sure, the father likely committed what equates to the original charges held against them. But I do think a lot of people on that jury would see this case, see the evidence, and know what the right thing to do was. And I think that's probably why they lowered the charges against him, because it's way more likely that if they brought that case forward with the original charges, OP's dad has a decent shot based off of the jury to walk out of there unscathed. Hermes3XX commented, "Jury nullification. If I had been on that jury, I would have convinced the other jurors not to charge him." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy nuclear revenge stories, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is, President of HOA wants me to join, ends up wanting to leave the country. A lot of people have told me to cross-post this here. I'm going to feel like a real idiot if that means something other than copy and pasting the entire thing. Oh well, I probably need a little deflating at this point. So this story is about a property I own but rent out. That may sound strange, but I don't think I could afford to live there these days. It's become somewhat exclusive. I've used dollars here because it's what most people reading this will relate to. This doesn't take place in the US, but I've given an approximate dollar value for local currency. This is going to be very long. Background. 1,000,000 years ago, my property was part of a large farm. I bought it about 30 years ago, long after the farm was broken up, but before there was any development near it. The piece of land I got was near the back entrance that joined into a dirt road that ran past. The more expensive plots were near the tarred road in the front. I originally bought a large chunk of the land intending to do some farming, but that never happened. About 20 years ago, some of the owners got organized. We'll call them the Organized Owners, OO, and had the area designated as a municipal suburb. The municipality agreed to put in tarred roads, water, and electricity if a certain percentage of the properties were developed. A construction company linked to the OO went around contacting the owners who had land but no buildings, offering to build houses for us at a very, very reasonable price, contingent on them getting a certain minimum amount of people signing up. While this was happening, one of the OO approached me and offered to buy half my property. I agreed, and the money I got for the sale, which was about 4 times what I'd paid for the entire chunk of land 10 years prior, combined with a small loan from the bank, gave me what I needed to pay for a house to be built. And it was a fairly large and nice house too. I stayed in the house for a few years, and my mom moved in with me. I had decided to subdivide the property again and build her a house next to mine. But unfortunately, an undiagnosed tumor took her before the house could even be started. Well, it was diagnosed, but too late to do anything. Soon after she passed, we had moved out of the house and started renting it out. About a few weeks before we moved out, the OO I'd sold the land to started talking about starting an HOA. I wasn't interested and left soon after. About 2 years later, the neighbor OO contacted me. There were 2 roads entering the area these days. The original tarred road that was near where the farmhouse had been and was entered from a fairly busy main road, and my dirt road back entrance, which was now a tarred entrance from a wide but not very busy municipal road. The HOA was trying to get the old farm road blocked off to improve security and decrease through traffic, and wanted the road next to my property to be the main and only entrance to the HOA community, and they were pressuring me to join. I said no, and I was adamant, and eventually they accepted that, but told me they wanted to have a sign near the road welcoming people to the neighborhood, and the only practical place to put it was on the edge of my property. They also wanted to build a little guard hut and have a security guard permanently monitoring who went in and came out, and they wanted to build his shed on my property. We came to an agreement whereby they would mow the lawn and pay the equivalent of about $35 per month in exchange for the land they needed. I was very happy with this arrangement, since the property was fairly large, and it didn't really cost them anything since they already had a full-time gardening service servicing the HOA. This all happened over a decade ago. They eventually got the other main road blocked off, and the HOA is paying for Rent-A-Cop to be permanently stationed close to my property, as well as mowing my lawn and paying me enough for takeaways for the family each month. I'm occasionally contacted by members of the HOA to get me to sign up, but I'm really not interested. My property has been rented to the same tenant for all these years, and everything there is going well for me, until about 3 years ago. When someone scared the crap out of my tenant's young daughter by making strange noises and shooting a gun close to her bedroom window 3 or 4 times over about a month. This scared my tenant, and I guess it scared the HOA because they and my tenant contacted me with a proposal. I join the HOA, and they give me exclusions from the HOA rules, including exclusions from paying the monthly fees, and in addition, they will build a wall around the entire HOA neighborhood, including electric fencing and security cameras. They told me they had wanted to do this for a while, but were unwilling to build the wall on property that was not in the HOA. I couldn't see the downside, and so agreed. The dishonest dealings. It took a little over a year to build the wall and get everything completed, which is quite fast. And then, a month to the day after everything was done, my tenant got an HOA warning about his dogs barking. He told the HOA that while the property was in the HOA, it was exempt from the rules. The HOA told him that they had canceled the exemptions and that he had 30 days to comply. He contacted me, and I'd opened some mail I'd gotten from the HOA. I'd ignored it since I was supposed to be exempt from the rules and fees. Man, did I get a surprise. They had retroactively canceled the exemptions and were claiming 1, that I pay late fees going back over a year, 2, that the easement agreement had been canceled, and that they were retroactively canceling it a year back because the HOA contract allowed them to use small unused portions of HOA members' land for the common good for free. 3, that I refund them the money they had paid for the easement over that period. 4, that I owed them money for the garden service mowing the large lawn. And 5, that I would be fined for each infraction my tenant failed to remedy. This started an expensive process involving lawyers and the court system that ended with a judge telling me that what the HOA had done was mostly legal. They had the right to revoke the exemptions, but that they had to give me 30 days notice. As I was walking to my car, the neighbor OO, the one who had bought half my land so many years ago, told me that I was stupid to have refused to join when the HOA started, as I could have been a founder member, whatever that means, and that next time I should be sure to understand the documents I sign before signing them. The plan. Neighbor OO was right. I should have read the contract better. Also, I was interested in what it meant to be a founding member. Spoiler, nothing. And so when I got home, I grabbed the HOA contract I'd signed, as well as all the other documentation they had provided me with, and started reading. I was determined to break every rule I could find a loophole to break. I didn't get past the first page. While the street address of the property is used to identify it for all practical purposes, in the city records, it has a unique property number that has to be used on legal records. When my mom moved in, I had subdivided the remaining property but hadn't yet started building on it. And when I gave the HOA the easement all those years ago, it had been on the property I'd sliced off from my mom. And when the HOA set up the contract, they had simply used the property number from the easement. The next afternoon, the neighbor OO delivered and had me sign for 2 documents. One telling me that my exemptions would expire in 30 days, and one letting me know that the easement would no longer be required after 30 days. I think he was being a bit malicious here because I lived about an hour away from the property and he drove out himself. The revenge. Exactly 30 days to the hour after the HOA had given me the 30 days notice, I knocked on the neighbor OO's door. Did I mention he was the president of the HOA and had him sign for 2 documents? The first was that I planned to build a house on my HOA property, which confused him, and the second was notice that they had 30 days to remove from the property the guard shed, the parts of the electric boom that were on my property, as well as the sign. He tried to engage me, but I ignored him, climbed into my car, and drove off. Early the next morning, I got a call from the HOA lawyer, who explained to me that their junk would be staying on my property since it was in an unused part of my land. I explained that I was building a house there and that the land would not be unused anymore. I could hear the smirk as he told me that building a second house to be spiteful would not be accepted by the courts. I sure hope he could hear the smirk in my voice when I told him that the property in question did not have a house, and was, in fact, barely large enough for a house to be built, and would not be large enough for any extraneous buildings. I then told him to go look up the property in question and call me back. I had sliced off just enough to be legal, which was just enough to build a small house. It took them just under 5 days to get back to me. Their lawyer told me that the terms of the easement meant that I could not cancel without their permission. So I emailed him a photo of the document they sent to me, canceling the easement. That afternoon, neighbor OO invited me to lunch, his treat, to discuss the problem. I said, no thanks. He extended the offer again 2 days later, and again I said, no thanks. Others of the original OO contacted me to try to talk. Some sounded aggressive, some sounded sympathetic. I said, no thanks to each of them. Eventually, the lawyer phoned and asked if we would come to some sort of arrangement. I asked what he had in mind, and he told me that he was prepared to discuss exclusions in exchange for access to my property. So I said, no thanks, and please don't call me again. About 9 days before their 30 days was up, I got a call from a different lawyer. He said he wanted to negotiate a surrender. His words, not mine. I agreed to meet him at his office the next day. I'd already had documents drawn up, and the meeting was as simple as me giving him the documents and him reading them over. My new easement offer, 1, included everything offered by the old easement offer. 2, I changed the line mow the lawn to get the property to HOA standards and keep it there, since it was now in the HOA. 3 would cost them about $500 per month instead of around $35. This amount would be increased with inflation. The previous contract didn't include that bit. 4, when canceled for whatever reason, the HOA would have to pay me a cancellation fee of around $7,500. 5, the contract automatically terminated 30 days after 1, any disciplinary action was taken against me, my tenant, or the property. 2, any complaints were levied by the HOA against the property. 3, any legal action was taken against the property by anyone in the HOA. Term number 6, that the lawyer who offered to negotiate surrender would be allowed to mediate any disputes between us at HOA's expense, and that 7, the HOA would pay all my legal fees if any legal action was taken against me. I had deliberately left some insane things in there so that I could appear to concede some points or be negotiated down when the HOA got indignant about the points I actually cared about. The lawyer didn't look happy. He said that my proposal sounded unfair, but that he would have the HOA president look at them. I reminded him that in 8 days, I'd be setting a group of men armed with sledgehammers and anger management issues loose on whatever of theirs was still on my property. That evening, I got an irate call from the HOA president. He told me he was never going to sign the new contract. I said, okay. He then told me I was charging too much per month and that it should be at the same rate as the previous contract. I pointed out that when I signed the previous contract, the area was under development, and there was at least one other road leading in and out, but that now there was only mine. And besides, mine was now developed with everything they needed. He told me I was forcing them to sign a document they didn't want to sign. I told him that he was free to not sign it. He whined about everything he could think of, and then eventually told me I'd be hearing from his lawyer. The next morning, Surrender Lawyer called to ask if I would be willing to come to their offices to sign the contract. I agreed. When I got there that afternoon, I learned that Surrender Lawyer was not a lawyer, but a paralegal. He handed me the contract and asked me to sign it. He laughed when I told him I'd have to read through it first to make sure nothing was changed, and mumbled something that sounded like, "I'm sure you would." I read the contract. Nothing had been changed. Not a single thing, and the HOA president had signed it with the surrender paralegal signing as witness. I looked at him and said, "Why did he sign this? It was stupid to sign it." And the paralegal looked at me and said, "I started telling him that signing it would be a bad decision, but he told me I wasn't being paid to think or give legal advice and to shut up. So I shut up." I said, "Do you understand what he signed here?" He looks at me and nods. He said, "I asked him if I should have had one of the lawyers look at it before giving it to you, and he told me that we'd already billed enough for this, and that he would sign it and sue me after their easement was safe." That happened about a year and a half ago. It took 6 months for the HOA to find out how screwed they were. They wanted to sue me, but their lawyers explained to them that there was no way to win. Even if the court sided with them, all they would get is the easement contract voided, and they didn't think that the court would side with them. The lawyers were adamant about one thing. The HOA could not live with the HOA pays my legal fees if legal action was taken against me, since it didn't limit the people taking legal action against me to the HOA. As worded, the HOA would be forced to pay for my legal fees if anyone took legal action against me. They argued that the courts would probably not enforce that, since the context of the agreement was to do with the HOA. And I told them that I was prepared to find out, since the HOA would definitely be the ones taking action against me if they challenged it. I eventually signed an addendum to the contract that said that the neighbor OO, HOA president, would personally pay all my legal fees unless he held no position at all in the HOA, and that the HOA would pay all legal fees if the HOA took legal action against me. He resigned from the HOA at the end of that meeting. I politely told him in front of everyone that he should not sign documents unless he understands what he's signing. He didn't look pleased. It came out during the mediation. You cannot imagine how happy the lawyers were that their paralegal was mediating, that without the ability to control access to the HOA neighborhood through the security boom, partially on my property. The HOA had become a gated community a number of years back. The HOA would be in breach of their own articles and would be dissolved. I also learned, should have been obvious to me, that all the security cameras were wired and all terminate in the guardhouse/guard shed. So basically, it was my way or the end of the HOA. That first mediation was quite funny. My paralegal looked more than a little glum as we assembled and he called everyone to order. I suspected that he had been told to work against me, so I took the initiative. I reminded everyone there that I had agreed to let the paralegal mediate, but that I had agreed to no arbitration at all. If I didn't feel like the proceedings were fair, I would leave and they could go ahead and sue. Paralegal brightened up and things actually went quite well. I'm writing this after getting home from the latest mediation. I built a paddling pool for the neighborhood dogs, as in I made it myself. I dug a hole, packed it with stone, and added a concrete finish. It was my first attempt, and if I say so myself, it looked, well, terrible. The HOA called for a mediation meeting, what they do now instead of taking official action. I've declined their mediation requests in the past, in which they told me, as nicely as they could, that the paddling pool was an eyesore right at the entrance of the HOA. I asked them to create a list of what needed to be fixed and how it needed to be fixed to give to me at the next meeting. The list was extensive. It basically required the pool to be rebuilt from scratch. I asked them if there was any way to reduce costs on the work they needed to get it up to HOA standards, and they assured me there was not. I thanked them, pulled out a copy of the agreement where they had agreed to get the property to HOA standards, which I'd highlighted, and handed it to them with the list. I told them the HOA usually preferred if these things were dealt with within 30 days. They started arguing until the mediator reminded them that they could not force me to comply without causing the easement to end. I should mention that their lawyers usually no longer attend these things. They said they would get it done. I also learned a lot about neighbor OO today. 1. I found out that neighbor OO sold his property about 3 months back and is apparently leaving the country for Australia. 2. I found out the HOA had successfully sued him for a crapload of money they had lost to his mismanagement as part of his vendetta against me. 3. I also learned that he had a vendetta against me. I have no idea what I did to upset him. I'm not sure if I'll screw with the HOA anymore. I already think I'm so close to breaking them. The only thing stopping them from canceling the contract is the massive financial loss if they do. I guess a lot depends on how they treat me and my tenants going forward. Also, I do like the monthly payments though, so I am motivated to play nice. Note, I never intended to go all nuclear revenge. My plan was for a little petty revenge. It's the stupidity and greed and bully mentality of the neighbor OO that turned this into nuclear revenge. I can only take minimal credit, although I did take it and run with it when I got the opportunity, so that's something, I guess. Thank you everyone. When I posted this on malicious compliance, it was because I felt like I could fly and wanted to share. Now the adrenaline is gone and I feel like I've been kicked by a donkey. I thought some people would like the story, but also thought it was too long for most. It seems I may have been very wrong. There are so many people commenting and sending messages that I cannot keep up. Thank you all so very much. You know, I think I just want to know where OP kind of got their own kind of paralegal chops from. As far as I'm aware, OP didn't describe themselves as being a lawyer or somebody that's like well versed in contract law. Somehow OP themselves crafted a contract that this HOA and their lawyers could not beat. I guess regardless, it still doesn't override the fact that neighbor OO should never have signed that contract. And I don't even understand what their bluffing was about. They're like, well, we're never going to sign that. You'll be hearing from our lawyers pretty soon. Only for the next thing from the lawyers to be, we're ready to sign the contract. Can you please come into the office? Foreign321 commented, you followed Sun Tzu's teachings perfectly. Never stop your enemy when they are making a mistake. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy nuclear revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.